Welcome to Thrashcast episode 20. We finally made it to double digits, everyone. This is great. You can find us tonight if you want to hear this once we post it on Friday at horrormetalsounds.com. So that's HMS or horrormetalsounds.com. You can also find us here right on our YouTube channel. So that's going to be Horror Metal Sounds at Ken.2468. And we do have a version on Spotify now. It's only audio only, but if you want to catch us there, you most certainly can. So if you're new to the channel, we do encourage you to like and subscribe. That's kind of important to us. It also lets you know when we drop new episodes for Thrashcast and other things on our HMS channel. So that'll always be there for you to do. Also, please feel free to leave us a like, comment on the videos if you like. We do love hearing some feedback, and more importantly, it's great to get a dialogue going when it comes to the podcast and to other videos on the site. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Prong, 1990, the classic Beg to Differ. But before we do, I thought we'd usher in my partners in crime and our special guest tonight. So we have my two partners. How are you both doing tonight?
Great.
And let me usher in Jason Deaville. He is our special guest tonight, and he's also the gentleman who requested this review of Prong. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing good. I'm stoked to dig into this one. Yeah.
I'm glad you are. And as you mentioned, you got a lot of notes for this one, so we're all good to go with this. This is going to be great. So before we do start our deep dive into the album, we always start with our opening segment for news and what's spinning items. And since Jason is our guest tonight, I thought I'd ask him first. Do you have anything in mind to mention, Jason?
Yeah, I'm actually just trying to catch up on stuff, but there's been some really great releases. I've been busy at work, so I haven't had a lot of time to dig into some of the stuff I've been wanting to, but finally started digging into the re-recording of Sepultura's Schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Fucking awesome album. I know, Jim, you reviewed it, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what do you guys think of that? I'm blown away by it, actually.
Love it.
Yeah.
We're all blown away by it.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people saying, why record a masterpiece, re-record a masterpiece? And I get that, but when you compare the two, I mean, just sonically, this new one just blows the first one away. It's just I love, all kind of the inconsistencies and errors of the first one, but this one just gels everything. It's like it's a perfect album. I think. And I don't know, I think about it, and they've done 3 of them now, right? They did Bestial Devastation, Morbid Visions, Schizophrenia. What are the odds that we're going to get Beneath the Remains? What do you think, guys?
We don't want that.
We don't want that.
Yeah, I believe you mentioned that in the Beneath the Remains
we don't want
episode.
That. No.
Yeah, it's kind of perfect the way it is, but
I agree, right? Like I think you hit it dead on, Jason, right? Like the first 3 re-recordings, I mean, they're great albums, but the sound quality limited my enjoyment of them, right?
Yeah.
So the re-recording stayed 100% true to like the original rawness and intensity and writing. They just made it sound better, right? Like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't know who the producer was on Schizophrenia, the original. Was it Scott Burns? Do you know, Jim, or do you guys know? Because I know he did Beneath the Remains.
Yeah, I think Scott, I think Beneath was the first one with Scott for sure.
Yeah, I believe you're right. Yeah. So, and that's a perfect production in my opinion for late 80s, early 90s album for sure. So don't touch it, Max and Igor. Just leave it alone. And apart from that, I've been
cash grab. If they do that, like then it just looks. It doesn't look good on them.
Yeah, and then they do a Rise. It's like, what the hell are you thinking? And then I've been listening to the remasters of the New Order and Legacy. Testament albums.
How is that?
Oh, those sound fantastic. Like they sound really, really good. Not that they sounded bad to begin with, but those are a couple albums that I hadn't visited in a long time. So these remasters actually made me go back and really dig into what I loved about those albums so many years ago. So it was good to revisit them. And that's probably about it. Getting ready for a trip to Norway this coming Saturday to attend the Beyond the Gates Festival. for the second year in a row. It's a 4-day festival in the heart of Bergen, Norway, and we got lots of really great bands. We got Mayhem, Behemoth, Enslaved, Satyricon doing 2 sets. So a ton of Norwegian black metal and other black metal bands. It's going to be a blast. Really looking forward to it.
Oh,
Cool.
Enslaved's most recent album, amazing.
So good, dude. So
Love
good.
it, love it. Yeah, that was awesome.
The thing about the sets, though, they do a set each and every year, I think for the past 4 years. But what they do is they revisit some of their early 90s albums with a modern twist. So they play the whole album. I think they're doing their 1995 album Frost this year, and they kind of add some of the newer Enslaved elements to
Right.
that old sound
Great.
and then play it live. It's really cool. So looking forward to that.
Cool.
Cool.
And
Jason,
for those who
sorry.
sorry Billy, let me just interrupt for a sec. For those who don't know, Jason's also a writer of the Metal Pit. I don't think I mentioned that at the top, but
I am indeed.
yes,
Wicked.
perfect. Sorry, and you were going to say, Billy?
Oh no, sorry. Just I meant to ask Jason. Is that like all day festival? Like they'll run from morning, day, and night?
I believe the first 2 nights it starts at around noon 30
Okay.
and then runs all day and night. And then the last 2 nights I think start at 5:30 and run right through till about 1 or 2 a.m. And then they also have some of these small offshoot day shows and after festival, like after 1 a.m. shows that are at some of the smaller clubs around Bergen. Like last year, they had Pentagram play the one night after hours at like 1:30 a.m. in a small venue. It was absolutely packed. It was insane.
Cool.
So yeah, they have there's a lot of music. So 4 days of the festival and then a couple of days of some of these day and night smaller shows.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's ask my buds here what they're doing for spinning and news. Jim, why don't you start up?
Yeah, what I'm spinning, I just received, it's not thrash, but I received Severed Angel's debut album. And it's kind of a American symphonic band. And this is the bonus one with the extra stuff from 2023. I know they have a new album out now. I'm probably going to pick that up. I think it was just released in July. I've streamed it, and it's really, really good. And I also, just to keep kind of, the new Deep Purple is amazing. So anybody, classic album, really, really good. And I'm sure it's going to crack for a lot of top 20 album lists this year. It's really, really good. But for news-wise, what was leaked today, actually the Metal Voice leaked it through King Diamond's website there, and it was just came up. They shared it, and then it went back down, is a possible Canadian, I would assume North American, but I believe there was Canadian dates on there for a tour this November with Overkill and Night Demon. So
Nice.
I would assume Toronto, the usual suspect cities across, leave Halifax out. But this is something I think I definitely make, it's going to be King Diamond, Not Merciful Fate like it was last year. And I think it's going to be pretty cool if it's legit. I mean, it went up and came back down. So hopefully, I think tomorrow there'll probably be an announcement.
That is awesome. I think the last time King Diamond had some North American dates, or at least Canadian dates, was probably about 10 years ago. I believe we were living in Montreal the last tour, 2014 or 15. So really cool. I hope that's actually happening. So fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Wicked lineup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And Billy, how about you? What do you got tonight for news and spinning items?
Yeah, so that November period is just crazy, right? The amount of bands that are coming through to run, like our area in November is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We can always use another. So yeah, just one news item. So this is turning out to be a pretty cool festival. I gave an update on previous episodes of the 2025 70K festival and next year's Milwaukee Metal Fest. But speaking of Maryland, the Maryland Death Fest 2025 lineup is really looking incredible, right? So you got Triptychon's going to be playing a set of their music, and they did something like this, I think, at Maryland Death Fest a few years back. Then they have another day they're doing a set of all Celtic Frost songs, so that'll be pretty cool. Obituary are doing Cause of Death from beginning to end. So that's pretty awesome. Tech death metal band Cynic are playing Focus in full. So that's a favorite of mine. But just a few of the other bands announced so far: Razor, Asphyx, Nile, Dark Funeral, Benediction, Paradise Lost, Unleashed, and Atrophy on the thrash side. So good mix of stuff. So yeah, it just the that blows me away every time they make an announcement. It's like, oh man, I got to go to this one. So
Well, and especially that I'm noticing more of the bands are focusing on specific albums. It's becoming more of a thing. And I wonder if that's because it's a draw for people
I think
just to come for that specific album, right? Like
yeah.
it seems to be more of a thing on these festivals lately that that bands are focusing on one album.
Yeah, good point. Like at Milwaukee Metal Fest announced last week that the Cavalera brothers are doing Schizophrenia.
Right.
Full,
Yeah.
so that's pretty cool too.
Very cool. Oh, and
nice.
Deicide also announced North American dates. They're coming to Toronto on September 15th. So
nice.
yeah.
We'll be there for that.
Awesome. We'll see you there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Wouldn't miss it.
It's actually like three. I mean, we've talked about this before, but three crazy months of metal shows. September, October, and November is like action packed.
All these bands coming off the festival circuits and getting out there again.
Yeah.
I'm not complaining.
Yeah, no,
No.
me either.
I'm not complaining.
And then in terms of what's spitting, so I'm doing something totally different today. Something we haven't done before. I got my copy of it. I've been playing it like crazy this past week. I go into little periods where I really get into 70s jazz fusion. So this is an album. It's a crazy album cover. So remember, this is the 1970s. This is Becker Brothers, two famous jazz musicians. One of them have passed, but the other one's still going. It's called Heavy Metal Bebop. And so you couldn't get a more fitting title for this album. I mean, it's so basically from instruments, you got sax, you got trumpet, you got a shredding guitar player, drums, and bass. And essentially, they're like typical 70s jazz fusion. It's mostly all instrumental. There is one crazy song on the album, if anyone gives it a try, called East River. Don't listen to it. It's got crazy vocals. Like it's not a great song, but all the other songs are live. And so they're just trading off the most intense, like shredding solos. It's fast, it's aggressive. The drumming is just pounding. And the good thing about jazz, as much as I love heavy metal musicians, some of the best musicians in the world are jazz musicians. So just the talent on display, right? And so I personally find, I found a friend of mine recommended jazz fusion when I was probably like 17 or 18. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was garbage. I didn't want any part of it. And he sat me down and made me listen to Al Di Meola, his first solo album, and some John McLaughlin, Mahavishnu Orchestra. And as a metal fan, I took to it right away, right? It just shreds. And the song structures kind of fit in with it. It can be very much like a metal band doing an instrumental track. So I think it fits for metal fans. But if anyone wants to try something different, give it a give it a try. You can find it on all the what do you call it, Spotify or Apple Music. Just lots of fun. It's something different. Like we can't all listen to metal 100% every single day, right? Mixing it up a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keeps.
Well, you could argue that Death went into a jazz
Yeah.
fusion type territory with later albums, and then Cynic, absolutely.
Mhm.
So it definitely has a place in metal for sure.
Yeah. That's it for me.
That's it for you? All right, perfect. Okay, so I have like one news item, and it's no secret that I am like the hugest Anthrax fan out there. So I just heard this recently, and apparently John Bush, it was a advisor, someone came up to him and mentioned about doing shows with Anthrax where they're going back to sing his songs when he was in the band. So John apparently just turned 60, which is crazy. It's like, man, he doesn't look 60 or sounded, but anyways, he said that he would love to like maybe bring his band Category 7. I know Jim, you were listening to that and you really liked it. Or maybe even Armored Saints to open up so he could actually play on both spots. But apparently, as in 2022, he was on the Metal Voice. He was interviewed there, and he brought it up then. But apparently, Scott has kind of turned around and said, in no uncertain terms would they ever consider it, because he said that Joey Belladonna is their vocalist, which is funny because Scott was the one who got Joey kicked out of the band the first time around. So I just thought it was like a little bit of a news tidbit that I heard. Whether this happens or not, I don't know. I kind of feel like don't want it to happen because I'm happy that Joey is back in the band. And,
well, I have a question though. Was it
yeah.
just going to be that there's a rumor that it's just Bush touring with them, or
No,
would it be the two
I'm
of them
assuming
kind of
it'd be
trading
both.
off?
I think the two of them. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
It wasn't specifically stated if that was the case.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not keen on that idea, but that's what I'm hearing, or at least that's what
there's only one Bush era album that I love, which is Sound of White Noise.
Yeah,
I mean, I could get the other ones. Yeah, they're okay. They're fun to spin once in a while, but they certainly aren't anything like Joey has done. So
no,
I don't know how I feel about that either. Yeah.
It's like what?
Yeah.
And then I mean, like, so Scott Ian is pretty much putting a squash to that. So
right.
I'm assuming it's not going to happen. But
has there been talk of a new Anthrax album though? Is there any?
Yeah, they're working on it. Yeah, they're
okay.
working on it. They've been working on it for more than a year and a half.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So the rumors is coming out later this year, apparently, because I think Joey was in the studio putting down the vocal tracks last November. Yeah, that's right, Jim.
Jeez, it's like been close to 10 years, hasn't it?
What?
Like almost since the last album.
Not quite, but what, 2016?
Yeah,
2016. So it's been a while.
Yeah, been a while.
I mean, obviously they're not making their money off the record sales, right? So
no, and all of them have other things going on, and
pretty much,
yeah. Actually,
I'm looking forward to it.
Frankie is in. We'll see him in Bergen, Norway, because he's playing bass for Norwegian black metalers Satyricon.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Which is crazy.
But then they went out and got Dan Lilker to replace Frankie, which is strange.
That is really strange.
Yeah, I don't know why that happened. Yeah, it's so weird.
And then you saw Scott in Milwaukee, right, Billy? Didn't he perform for somebody who was playing in Milwaukee?
Who's that?
Jamie Jasta?
Scott Ian.
Yeah. Scott was there with Mr. Bungle. He was part of
Mr. Bungle, right?
Okay. Mr. Bungle.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. I mean, I'm not crazy over it, but who knows?
I'd like to see it. I think it'd be cool.
You? Yeah?
I'd love to see a split set. That would be wicked, but it'll never happen. That would be like, the Roth and Hager thing, like.
Yeah. Did you guys ever catch Bush with Anthrax?
I have.
Live? Yeah?
Yeah, twice. I've seen him twice.
And how was it?
I saw him on Sound of White Noise, which was was pretty good. I saw them on Volume 8 when they played the Phoenix.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was all right. Like, I wasn't bad, but at that point the band wasn't. They're like a former shadow of themselves, right? When the
Yeah.
later albums came out,
Yeah.
it wasn't really much of an Anthrax sound. So
I haven't heard him do the old like Joey stuff, so I wouldn't even know what that sounded like. You know?
oh, you can if you
Yeah,
listen
it's on
to
YouTube.
the
Yeah. I just
yeah.
never checked it out. But
But they did release that Lesser of Two Evils album,
Yeah.
I think in 2002
oh
or
yeah,
2003, where
yeah.
he re-recorded all the classic Anthrax songs
That's
that were
true.
sang by
Yeah.
Bush, which is all right, but it's not that great. I
Totally forgot
never.
about that album. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why you totally
Yeah.
forgot about that album, dude. Nobody wants to remember it.
Yeah.
So whatever. And so they just celebrated their 43rd anniversary, which is kind of cool. So
Yeah.
that was like kind of a big thing for them.
Fucking
I
ancient.
think that's
man.
why the whole Bush thing they started talking about it because of the anniversary, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of it personally.
Yeah.
So. All right, boys. Now that we've got all our news and what's spinning items out of the way, we'll get down to business. And first thing before we talk about Prong, I came up with some questions to ask you guys, so I sent those over to you to get your thoughts on it. So the first question I wanted to ask was, what genre do you think Prong is in? Is it like thrash? Is it punk? Is it groove? Industrial? Is it all these things? We'll start with you, Jason.
Yeah. Well, I think this is really kind of a tough one to answer. You
Mhm.
know, I will say, like, I don't know how many metalheads were aware of Prong before Beg to Differ. I mean, I
Hmm.
certainly wasn't. Um,
Yeah, same here.
their first EP, Primitive Origins, released in '87. It was just basically, a straight up hardcore album, a la Bad Brains and Discharge. And then they had their debut album, I think in '89, Force Fed, which kind of introduced a little bit of some more metal elements. And well, the first metal elements, because again, the first EP was not metal at all. And there were some riffs in there that were not too far off, like early Metallica, Motorhead. There was even some like stabs at Venom a little bit. But, as you guys are all old like me, at that time, hardcore and punk had not really gelled like it would a few years later. Thinking back to those early days, in my experience, there were two camps. There was like in '89 specifically, as far back as I can remember, there was metalheads and there were punk and hardcore fans.
That's
And,
right.
of course, you had bands prior to that, like Sick of It All, Agnostic Front, that, tied a little bit of metal into the hardcore punk ethos. But it wasn't until like DRI came
Hmm.
around that it really kind of pulled things together. So, yeah, I mean, I think without DRI, Beg to Differ might have never been on my radar. I might never have checked it out. So, again, prior to Beg, they were just definitely punk and hardcore. And then Prove You Wrong, which was the album after Beg, they were Beg and Prove You Wrong were thrash. And then
Yeah.
anything after that for Prong was like quasi-industrial metal type stuff and groove metal.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask like the average metalhead, who invented groove metal, they would probably say Pantera or Exorder. But I think it's to Prong's credit that they were already kind of creating the blueprint for groove metal before either Cowboys from Hell came out or even
Yeah.
Slaughter in the Vatican were released. So
4 months. 4 months ahead of time,
4
actually.
months ahead, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
That came out.
yeah, and then they were probably writing, a year or two before that, or at least a year before that. So yeah, tough one to answer, but I would say definitely crossover and groove would probably
Okay.
be the two
Okay.
biggies.
Cool. Good point. And Billy, how about you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I personally think they kind of defy putting them in a box. Like to me, when I listen to them, yeah, I hear some thrash and crossover, but as Jason said, lots of groove. You hear some hardcore. There's some industrial mixed in there, alternative metal. I mean, I
Hmm.
hear anything when I listen to them. But I found this I was listening to this interview with Tommy, basically talking about the anniversary of Beg to Differ, the 25th year or whatever it was. And so this is his description of the band at that time. So I'm going to read it because I haven't memorized it. But he's like, with its mixture of hardcore and almost jazz influence and groove metal like sound, Beg to Differ sounded a lot different from anything else going on in metal at the time. I don't consider us a hardcore band. I don't consider us a thrash band. We weren't really crossover. We weren't industrial, which was barely existent at that time. Tommy Victor says we were somewhat in the void, and he believes that's why the album, gained such popularity, because it was nothing like what was out there before. So I thought that was an interesting quote that basically summed up the band at that time perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's one other thing I wanted to add
Sure.
that I forgot to. I think Beg's biggest selling point for me, as someone who was not familiar with the band at all prior to it, is that it shared two similarities with one of my favorite albums of the time, which was Metallica's And Justice for All. First, I think if you listen to the album, it has that kind of cold, clinical crunch of Justice. It's kind of reverb soaked. It's a bit sterile sounding, which I'm absolutely a sucker for. And then, I've heard others complain about the production, saying that comparing it to Exodus's Impact is Imminent, which is also kind of a dry production, which is an album I also love production-wise and musically. And then secondly, related to Metallica, is that Pushead did the artwork for the album.
That's
And
right.
he did much of the artwork for the singles of Justice and all the merch, all the t-shirts and stuff like that. And, as vain as that might seem, the cover art was truly kind of a selling point for me, because prior to the internet, what did you have to go off of? You couldn't just check out, a song on Spotify or YouTube. You either had to hear, either tape trading or talk to a friend about it, or, judge it based on its artwork. And, Beg to Differ shared that kind of ethos with Metallica, specifically through the art. So I don't know. Honestly, I truly believe that if it wasn't for the artwork, we might not even be sitting here talking about this album today, because I think it probably brought a lot of people in.
That's a good point. Jim, what about you? You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it kind of hit me when I first listened to Prong. The metal scene was changing. So, like, it already started kind of with Faith No More, and I'm not comparing the two of them, like, because they're totally different. But like, you had The Real Thing come out in '89, and I remember listening to it going like, wow, this is not like any hair metal or thrash. It's kind of more of a rock album, but maybe a little bit as between that and '92's release of Angel Dust was kind of like this with Beg to Differ all the way up to Cleansing. There was kind of that change, and I kind of compare it to that in the sense that the whole metal movement was kind of changing a bit, and I think Prong was a natural like a natural progression into that. Definite groove metal, and I think they did it before Pantera changed into a groove metal band. Obviously, they did in a timeline, but I mean, they went on the road for, I think, with Pantera with Cleansing, and that was a wicked album. I just find it's a lot of people really put the focus on Pantera, and I mean, I love Pantera. But these guys definitely took a more thrashier, kind of a mix of a groove. There's definite elements of thrash, and it's a crossover band as far as I'm concerned, until maybe the mid '90s when it started to definitely hone in on that industrial metal sound. But still, no, I like it, and I definitely think on the sort of the you have the boxes of all the different types of metal. This definitely well represents groove, thrash, throw in a little bit of stoner in there as well. Why not? And but I really liken it to the same as those. And then, even like in Faith No More, a lot of people bought that album and didn't realize they already had previous ones. I went back, and then, I mean, the previous album for Introduce Yourself was it was a punk crossover album. That album was for Faith No More, and they went a lot more commercial in the other way. But I find those two bands in the early '90s, late '80s were the ones that were kind of changing the landscape, and I thought, for the better at that time, because we were leaving the hair metal behind, which kind of ran its course and killed itself off, kind of like the dinosaurs. And then we've got, this coming in, so I see a lot of similarities there, but I put it as a groove stoner, elements of thrash, definite crossover for sure, especially those early albums.
Cool. Yeah, for me, like it's the industrial period that I like, because I was really into industrial metal back in the 90s. So when they did cleansing, obviously they started adding a lot of more industrial elements into their sound. So that's when I really like them a lot, because it's like, because I was into bands like Ministry and stuff like that. So when you're hearing Prong, yeah, that's kind of cool. So I really got into them. So I kind of see them as like, thrash, some punk, some hardcore punk, some industrial. I think we've all stated it pretty much that they kind of straddle the line in many genres, which is great, which makes them kind of a unique band. And that's going to lead us into my second question, and that was, where do you rank Prong? So based on what we just discussed about where they fit in the genre, where do you think they rank in the crossover field? How about you, Jason? What do you think?
Well, I think they're a bit different. I think Beg is probably the most progressive groove crossover thrash album of its time, especially when you compare it to some of the heavyweights at the time, like bands like DRI, Excel, Suicidal, The Accused, Cerebral Fix, MOD, SOD, all these bands, Uncle Slam, who were all straightforward in their approach. So to some degree, it's hard to lump them in with all those other bands in crossover. As they were, as you were saying, Billy, they were just, as Tommy said, they were so much more than that on Beg to Differ. You couldn't really peg it. They even said so himself. They were doing kind of everything. So, of course, I understand the appeal to crossover fans. The appeal to the album of crossover fans. But what the other bands didn't have that Prong had, even though it was in its infancy on Beg to Differ, was a real kind of alt metal tinge to their songwriting, which would go on to influence bands just a couple years later, like Helmet,
Helmet.
Unsane, Quicksand,
Yeah.
Deftones, and ultimately kind of the whole of nu metal. And I think they also have kind of this dissonant post-punk edge to them, similar to Killing Joke, which is not surprising because I think the drummer Ted Parsons was in Killing Joke for a time. So, yeah, I think it's really hard to lump them in with their peers. They were just so much more.
Okay, cool. And Jim, you got anything to add on this one?
Well, I agree. It kind of hits the middle of the pack for me because they did change their sound towards the mid '90s. But and there is a lot of heavyweight crossover bands in there, legendary, But I think they've got their place in there, and I think they're an important band to the movement, and that's as Jason was saying. They inspired a lot of other bands like nu metal, especially, that's going to come down the line a few years from this album. So, and continue along. So, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Billy, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of same line, same train of thought there, right? Like I personally never really consider them a pure crossover band. So this won't show up in my crossover list coming up. Not to give away the ranking, not because I don't think it's a good album or bad.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think Ken, you and I, when we were talking about the topic, I had said to you, it's funny. I always just consider them like an alt metal band.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But I also have to be honest, right? Like I discovered Beg to Differ. I liked the album when it came out, but I was like getting into death metal and things at that time, so I really didn't know the next couple albums. So I can't speak to that and what level. From what I know, they were a bit more alt metal and industrial sounding, and you guys sort of confirmed that. So yeah, I never really thought of them as a crossover band.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you think what you like about them, and that's fine. So like it'll lead into the final question now about Tommy Victor. And what I like about Tommy, for me, and what I was going to ask you guys, is that what do you think of him as a musician, and do you think he's been influential on the scene? And I know that he's been a part of Ministry in the '90s, and I love Ministry in the '90s, so I was always following him there. He was also in Tapeworm briefly, and in Antidote as well. So like he's kind of traveled around to various circles and bands, but obviously his main band is Prong. And Jason, what do you think of Tommy Victor as a musician?
Well, I think he's hugely influential.
Okay.
So influential, in fact, that I think he doesn't get nearly the credit he deserves for the number of bands and genres, he had a hand in shaping. Prong are to groove metal and new metal, um, and industrial metal, as Metallica were to the birth of thrash, in my opinion. So really, there's no arguing that. Along with Pantera and Sepultura, I think they're their only kind of thrash band of the time to navigate the rise of grunge without really being affected at all. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
look at bands like Exodus, who released Force of Habit just to kind of, peg their way into this alt metal thing. And it was a terrible album, um, in my opinion, just because they you know, tried to fit in at the time. But bands like Prong and Sepultura and Pantera didn't need to do that. They already had their pulse on that, and they were able to cope with those changes much better. I think by 1990, Tommy was infusing, obviously thrash with groove, and by 91, he was the driving force of what would become what we were talking about earlier, alternative metal. Then in 94 with Cleansing, he literally created the next iteration of industrial metal. And then that would go on to influence bands and artists such as Strapping Young Lad and, Rammstein, even Static X, Hansel and Gretel, and, maybe even Marilyn Manson. So I don't know.
Well, he even played with Marilyn Manson.
Oh, did he? I didn't
Yeah,
even know
yeah.
that.
I think he did a stint with Manson. I think he did a stint with Danzig, I believe.
Yeah,
So,
Danzig, yep.
and maybe even Rob Zombie. I mean, and I think even I don't know if it was Trent Reznor's solo stuff or Nine Inch Nails, but that would have been probably the Marilyn Manson kind of
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
I was familiar with what Ken mentioned earlier, Ministry, but I had no clue about those other bands. So that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Billy, do you have anything to add to the this question?
Yeah, I mean, given that really my knowledge of Tommy is Beg to Differ and their 2023 album, like I don't think I'm in a good place to weigh in on his
That's okay.
how influential he was, but certainly, yeah, I think Jason summarized it from the little I know.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's all right. That's all I had for the questions. I just wanted to get just your sense of what you think of the band, some of what's going on. So we'll turn our attention over to just a very brief file here. So they were formed in New York City, 1986. They do blend this kind of like hardcore thrash industrial, as we mentioned already. They also added some like Pantera grooves in the 90s. In the band, you had Tommy Victor on vocals and guitar, Ted Parsons on drums, and then Mike Kirkland on bass and vocals, because they sort of traded off lead vocals from time to time. The first album was Force Fed, that came out in 1988. The band had 13 studio albums, and the last one being The State of Emergency in 2023. So that's pretty cool. So we kind of basically, as we're talking tonight, to discuss Beg to Differ. It was released on March 12th, 1990 on Epic Records. It had that, as Jason's already mentioned, the iconic album cover by Pushead. And I agree with Jason. It's how I looked at the band too. That cover was everything to me when I first saw it, being an artist growing up in the late 80s, early 90s. This album also marked a shift in musical direction for them. So they started blending thrash and hardcore. It also features one of the, as I think we've discussed this, but features one of the early examples of groove metal. So it predates Pantera by Cowboys of Hell by 4 months. So that's so they can pretty much hold claim to fame to that.
Yeah.
Jason, is there anything you want to add to that before we can move on?
No, I think you summarized it quite well. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's dig into the album. We'll start with track 1, and For Dear Life. Jason, start us off.
All right. So kind of it's been a while since I had heard this album, actually. I don't know why. I listened to it it's probably one of my most listened to albums. But for some reason, it kind of fell off my radar over the last couple of years. So the first thing that came to mind upon revisiting the album for the podcast is how the first minute of the song immediately kind of made punk sound dated and tired in 1990, the year the album came out. The thrash elements, are plain as day in the song, and I hear a ton of kind of both Among the Living era Anthrax with its like kind of stomp-inducing riffing, and even some Pete Sells era Megadeth with some of the syncopation in the guitar. In fact, the opening few riffs are, I thought they were sort of eerily reminiscent of Wake Up Dead. Megadeth's Wake Up Dead. If you go back and listen, there's just something about the pattern which sounds a little bit like Wake Up Dead. So this was kind of I think the perfect choice for the band to open the album with, as there was no doubt it was going to resonate kind of immediately with thrash fans who had not yet heard of Prong, or who were just digging in for the first time. And I can't end this without kind of commenting on the elephant in the room, which is the cowbell. Is this the first thrash song to have cowbell? I think it might be the first and only thrash song with cowbell.
Yeah, I love that funky cowbell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I in my notes, I sort of said this was a fist pumping thrash anthem, which I kind of feel it is. Jim, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I love this song. I think it starts off the album awesome, and it's one of my favorite on the track. I mean, this has got that heavy intro, and total Anthrax vibe. Agree with Jason there. As soon as you listen to it, especially the first few minutes, you're like, oh man, this has got a really reminiscent of Anthrax prior. And I mean, I think this is a drum track. The drums on this album are so loud and just bombastic. I love it. And it just kicks you in the ass. I mean, that at around 2.25 minutes, they've got that chug that just kind of speeds up, and the guitar leads into the guitar solo, and that's pretty cool. I just think it's a strong song and one of my favorites on the album. Love it.
Cool. Billy, anything to add to it?
Yeah, no, I think you guys hit most of the stuff I had. The only thing I'd add is, and this applies to like probably the next 4 or 5 songs. Like, I think one of the things Prong did really well is to write a chorus. I mean, like a hook-filled chorus, right? Like the riffs around the chorus are fantastic. It's catchy. The backing vocals kicking in, and I mean, they were never the most complex structure of a chorus. They were straightforward. They'd be singing the song title quite often, Steady Decline or Beg to Differ, but still, like, it was done in a way, like, it was filled with hooks, and it was something you could catch on to right away. So always sort of appreciated that about the songwriting.
Yeah, that's funny. That's what I was going to say. The chorus, for dear life, for dear life. I kind of like, it's got a very Anthrax vibe, just the way they're shouting it and stuff like that.
Oh, great. I just got it out of my head, and then you did that, and now it's back in my head.
Sorry, dude.
That's okay. It's a good one to have in the head.
Yeah, for sure, dude, for sure. All right, so track number 2 will go to Steady Decline. And Jason, what do you think of it?
I love it. I'm not sure anyone had heard quite anything like this in thrash up to this point. I mean, again, they're not a thrash band, but I mean, for thrash fans, this was probably something quite different. I will say for me, this is kind of more of a mid-paced thrash song than I think a full-on groove song. And I say that because just like the last song, it really has that kind of mosh-inducing Anthrax stomping vibe to it again. I keep hearing Anthrax throughout this album, and I can't get it out of my head. Previously, I had never heard that. Like, revisiting it is when I realized how much this album, kind of pulls from Anthrax in a lot of ways. There's also kind of an infectious swagger to the song that reminds me of another of my favorite bands at that time, the very underrated Wrathchild America, and their album 3D from '91. Something about the dynamics of the groove of this song really reminds me of Wrathchild America. It just kind of wiggles into your ear and never wants to leave. And then also we have to talk about those gang vocals. They have to be some of the best in thrash, maybe the best. There's one part in there where Tommy Victor, he shouts steady, and then everyone
Mhm.
else echoes, in a big resounding steady decline. And I just love those gang vocals and that follow up on Tommy. And the build up is really awesome at the end. It's really palpable where things really kind of slow down with Tommy repeating witness to the crime several times, and then bam, you're just back into that really awesome chorus. So I really, really, really love this song. Really hard to get out of the head.
Yeah, yeah, it's I could see that. It's kind of addictive in some ways.
Yeah.
Jim, Billy, any thoughts you guys want to add in here?
Yeah, maybe the only thing, yeah. So I'd agree with all that. Like I think on this track we actually get sort of an interesting guitar solo. Like I mean, nowhere on this album do we ever get into an extended guitar solo, but every now and then we do get some interesting solos. So this is one of those. Like I agree that chorus is really cool, right? Tommy doing steady, the band doing steady, then everyone doing decline. That's really cool. The riffs are really good here. I guess the one thing doesn't appeal to me is kind of the spoken word part that sort of kicked in like at around just past 2 minutes and around 3.5. Like I don't know, that's just a personal thing for me. Like I didn't like that spoken word part of the vocals, but it's a minor nitpick.
Okay. Jim?
I kind of like the spoken word part. I'm not going against Billy. I think it kind of adds to it. But I wrote down that I love this because it's almost like a diet groove. So what it is the band seems to be getting kind of setting the pace for what's going to come later on the album. And I think this one here, it's got some really start of some cool groovy, kind of a slower punk groove to it in some parts of it, and it's kind of like getting you ready for what's going to come, especially like even on Beg to Differ. I don't want to give away my next one, but and then it just kind of progresses from there, where I find the album kind of delves in and out of a little bit of thrash, but kind of keeps that sort of a crossover to and you get little elements like with the spoken word of maybe the start of some industrial. There's a lot of stuff spawning here, and I think that's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah, this is a pretty solid song. I actually think the first three songs are pretty solid all the way through. So we'll move over then to track 3, Beg to Differ, the title track, which is a song that I really love. Heaping amounts of groove in this song. What do you think, Jason?
Well, we definitely got to say this is one of the band's most memorable songs of their career. Well, maybe, perhaps not quite as memorable or popular as Snap Your Fingers, Snap Your Neck, but I mean, definitely next to that, which that song, Snap Your Fingers, Snap Your Neck, was kind of their breakthrough song, right?
That's
Just
right.
kind of everything went crazy for them after that. I think this song alone kind of defines what would go on to be the Prong kind of signature sound for every album kind of after this one. Just tons of groove, lots of odd time signatures, some very cool melodic vocal experimentations. Some of them not for the best, as Billy was mentioning there with the spoken word stuff in the last song. But you got to hand it to Tommy. He was always trying to experiment, try different things that weren't necessarily being tried, by bands of this ilk at the time. So one thing we can do is we can take this all the way back to And Justice for All. Like if you listen, there was one song in Justice for All that this reminds me of, and that's Harvester of Sorrow. So Beg to Differ has about a minute and a half intro that really reminds me, like that build up, like Harvester of Sorrow, that just keeps going and going and going and going and going. I think Beg to Differ is similar in that way. It's just one of those really epically long intros, and probably the best opening, since Harvester of Sorrow to a song. So I really love it for that. It really kind of sets up the song, that first minute and a half.
Okay, cool. I like this song too. Like this was my first introduction to Prong with this song. There used to be anyone who was in Toronto back in the 90s, there used to be Chris Toomey, who had Sounds of the New Metal. I think it was called Sounds of New Metal. It was a CIUT radio show for Toronto, University of Toronto. So he played a lot of like music that I've never heard of before. So like he was playing stuff like Prong, he was playing stuff like Dead Horse, Lungfish. He played a lot of interesting experimental kind of metal. So that's where I first heard this song, and I liked it for that reason. It was unique. It was very, very unique. And again, the chorus is always what I like. I just love that chorus. Beg to differ. It's so great. Jim, do you have any thoughts about Beg to Differ as well?
It's a great track, and like
Mhm.
I say, this was like even more groovier than the track prior, but still has a lot of the cool thrash elements to it. I like it, and that kind of spoken word part, to fall in line. That's pretty cool. I mean, it's their signature song off this album, so it's like their
Yeah.
hit as far as I'm concerned, and it's worthy of that for sure.
Okay. Billy?
Yeah, for me, it's there's a couple of songs I really like at the end of the album, but this is probably maybe my favorite. It's where I discovered the band, and I can't for the life was Much Music still around? The Canadian for those American friends,
Yeah, they were around.
because I'm sure I must have saw the video for this that made
Yeah.
me go out and buy the album. But yeah, like it's I mean it's the type of song that just grabs you by the neck, right? Like a metal fan, regardless of what kind of metal fan you are, there's something in here for everybody. So that's pretty cool. But just that heavy, like groove guitar hook in the chorus. And Jim, you hit on this, but I really like the way they do the lead into the chorus, where Tommy goes super soft and just sings Fall in Line, then the heaviness of the riff and the chorus kicks in. Like I just think it's so effective, right? Like not having that slow part, like the slow part makes that heavy part so much heavier. So I think really good. And actually, this might be the best guitar solo. Still, sadly, very brief. I mean, this song's got an extra minute to it than some of the others, but I still think it's a pretty cool guitar lead. So yeah, big fan of it, and this might be my favorite Tommy's vocal performance as well on the album.
Okay. I think it's unanimous. We all like the song for sure. For sure. So we'll move to track 4, Lost and Found. And Jason, lead us off.
Yeah, I think you can't talk about the song without talking about drummer Ted Parsons,
Yeah.
who we mentioned earlier, uh, worked with Killing Joke. I believe he also worked with Swans,
Yep.
Godflesh.
Yep.
His work on this song is absolutely stunning, mind-blowing. The precision on the hi-hat, the double bass patterns. It kind of sets Prong apart from the rest of the crossover scene at the time. Was Ted himself just really kind of an experimental drummer and really unafraid to do things different. And it truly shines in this song. It's funny when I listen back, I was listening back this past week. Again, I hear a lot of Helmet's breakthrough album, Meanwhile, in this
Mhm.
song in particular. And it's interesting because Meantime, I think, came out a full 2 years after Beg to Differ. So I think
That's
it
right.
speaks volumes as to kind of the influence of this album, Prong in this album specifically, on a band like Helmet, who would go on to be absolutely huge, maybe even at the time, a couple of years later, maybe even eclipsing Prong in the popularity department. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they were to call this album an influence for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I love Helmet. Helmet was great. They had a lot of really good albums in the late 90s,
They were
early
always kind of, to
2000s.
me, kind of
Yep.
the jock version of Prong. I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
a lot of friends at school, jocks, who kind of loved Helmet.
I can see that. It
Uh,
was heavy
yeah,
guitars. Yeah,
yeah,
I can
it
see
was just
that. I always kind of lumped them kind of on the Anthrax side. Also because Frankie, for a brief time, played bass in Helmet. When he left, he
I
actually
had
left
no clue about
Anthrax.
that either. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, he left. He actually left Anthrax for a very short time. I don't know why he left, and he actually joined. He actually joined Helmet, so he was their bass player for like for a cup of coffee, basically, and then came back to Anthrax. But
Right. Crazy.
I always like link the two bands together. What the one thing about this song, like Lost and Found, they use this on the commercial breaks during MTV's
Yes.
Headbangers
Yeah.
Ball. So
That's right.
that's where I remember it because I
Yeah.
remember reading and hearing about that. So that's kind of its big claim to fame.
Yeah.
So Billy, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, I had the drumming as the
The
standout
drumming?
as well, right? There's some really great drum fills. Like, I just find the drumming so interesting. Like, I also called out the cymbal work, right? If you listen carefully, there's just a lot of really cool stuff going on in the kit. And even on the guitar, right? There's a couple jazzy guitar lines thrown in, totally unexpected. They're not heavy on the jazz, but just little hints of it. And sort of Tommy alluded to it in his description of the album as well. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, again, once again, you got the addictive chorus. It's what Prong does well. Like, I guess if I'm going to say something that, like I do find, and it'll start, the band will really start to switch it up with the next song. But like, I find, although there's differences in track 1, 2, 3, and 4, they do, particularly with the chorus, they follow a bit of a pattern at point. So I
Same.
do appreciate that they're going to mix it up over the second half.
That's a
Of the
good point.
album.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really good point. Up to this point, the structures are all very familiar. The
yeah,
blueprint is all very familiar.
but
Yeah,
they
I,
will
I
mix
never
it
thought
up
of that, but
quickly. Yeah.
yeah.
Jim, any thoughts?
You guys pretty much said it all. It's a great track, and yeah, this and the next track, really good. The drums on it are fantastic. But I think it is throughout the whole album. It's a really solid. Drum. The drums are really predominantly sound in most of the songs on this album. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we'll move to track 5, Your Fear. And Jason, what do you think of it?
I think Billy hit it on the head with saying kind of the album shifts, takes a bit of a different tone, starting with this song compared to the last few songs. Probably the least metal of songs on the album. It
Mhm.
has a definite pronounced alternative metal feel to it. You know,
Yeah.
again, going back to that helmet comparison, this sounds a lot like what we would hear later on Meantime. And then where the metal is not so present in the first half of the song, it kind of returns in the latter half of the song, you know, showcasing some very cool thrash riffing, some pinch harmonics. And there's a couple of solos in here that I'm like, whoa, kind of reminds me of Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman. There are a couple of shredders, thrash shredders. So, yeah, it gets a bit more metal towards the end, but definitely the most, I think, moody of the songs found on the album up to this point.
Yeah, like the opening, that mellow opening, and then that kind of really slow chug that sort of picks up like
Yeah,
130 into it. Like, yeah,
yeah.
I could see your point. I could see your point on that one. I do like the chorus though. I like the chorus here too, and I like the whole "surrender your fear." I love how they repeat that. That's
Yeah, that's
great.
cool. Yeah.
Like they really kind of cement that home with the lyrics. That's the one thing I like about this band. I do like the fact that they do the lyrics tend to kind of really fit within the song, and they kind of they know how to accentuate certain words, very much like what we were talking about last week with nuclear assault and how they would emphasize a certain word. They do it here too, which is what I kind of, my ears picked it up, so I kind of like that.
And it really helps with memorability. Like
Yes,
when
yeah,
they accentuate those words, it just you never forget them. You know, you might not have heard the song for 10 years, but you hear it and you're like, it just pops
oh
back
yeah,
into your head.
yeah.
They I think that's a really good point, Ken. They really do accentuate words.
Yeah, that's the one thing I like. I mean, I know Billy's saying the choruses are all great, and they are, and it's
Yeah,
simple chorus verse. But I just like how they emphasize certain words. But that's
yeah.
what I've noticed. So Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good song. I find the ominous kind of sound, and Jason kind of said it with a moody kind of vibe. It's got kind of a bit of some doom elements to it.
Mhm.
That kind of it does change from the first part of the album, and I like that. It's a little bit more slower in parts, but then speeds up. It's a good song overall. I really like it. And yeah, and the drum intro. I mean, it just continues on the song. The pronounced drum sound for sure.
Yeah, Ted Parsons is great. He's a great drummer
Yeah,
for sure.
underrated.
And
I think
oh
very
yeah,
underrated.
very underrated. Totally. Billy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely maybe one of two that are probably the most experimental track on the album. So it's kind of cool, and we needed to mix it up. So I'm good with that. Kind of like the different pacing on the album. I mean, on the track. So that's pretty cool. I think Jason, I had noted like particularly in the chorus parts, I get alt rock, alt metal comes to mind, and again, this is a personal taste. Like that doesn't click as well with me. I
Yeah.
still don't mind the song, but when they sort of deviate too far in that direction, I appreciate they do it. I respect that they mix it up, but it doesn't click as well for me. Interesting too that this is the longest song on the album if you exclude that live track. So yeah, a very moody song, and for that to be the longest song, I think that's kind of interesting that they chose to go that route. For me, I maybe would have shortened it, but again, I'm nitpicking, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So a lot of what you're hearing in track 5, you're sort of getting a little bit in track 6.
Hmm.
Take it in hand. What do you think, Jason?
Well, I feel like there's the first thing that kind of jumped out to me is how much the riffing kind of reminded me of Mustaine on this song.
Okay.
Again, it's going back to those syncopated patterns that you would find on Peace Cells, more so on Rust in Peace, which I think was released the same year as this album.
Yes.
But to me, when you think of a thrash riff master, you think Mustaine, but I think you can put Tommy Victor in there as well. Not to the same degree because he's not doing it all the time, but I can really, really hear his talents for writing really memorable thrash riffs and just being talented as a thrash guitarist or rhythm guitarist. You can really hear that he has a lot of practice with that at this point, and it comes across in this song. So at least 2 minutes of the song kind of reminded me of Rust in Peace to some degree. Yeah, again, it just, I think, truly showcases Tommy's skills on the guitar, where maybe some of the other songs, not so much in the thrash vein, as far as his talent. So he wasn't just a groove inspired kind of one trick pony.
Mm-hmm.
He had some serious thrash chops, and they're to be heard in this song in places.
Yeah, I agree. Like there's that. It's a really good moshing chug here. I love it for that reason. For me, I like the song though. Just again, I go back to the lyrics, right? Because I love that line where he says, "Shit hits the fan, you're at the end of the rope." I love that. It's such a great line. And it's just the way he repeats it. That's such a great line to me. But that's what I picked out.
Cool.
So Billy, what do you think?
Yeah, this is one of my favorites, actually. I think I know, Ken, you said it sort of follows a bit after the previous track.
A little bit at the start.
At the start, yeah, at the start. But yeah, to me, this is sort of I find the closest thing to thrash they do. I
Mhm.
think the first track definitely has thrash elements, but for me, and I get crossover thrash here as well.
Big
So yeah, I'm a big fan of this one. Also, but I do like, whereas I didn't like the slower parts as much on the previous song, here I like it, right? Like at around
Okay.
3 minutes, they actually go into this nice melodic and even atmospheric section. Like to me, it was almost like a Pink Floyd psychedelic kind of quick little melodic part, and then it sort of gets back into the heavy mode. So yeah, I like this song. Like I think often in the previous tracks, I'm always like, oh, I want them to go a bit quicker. I want them to go,
Mhm.
and I kind of get that here. So I appreciate this track.
Cool. Jim?
Yeah, just a quick note. I think it's one of the faster tracks and
Yeah.
parts on the album, and I think that's where the appeal for me comes in as well with this song. Excuse me. I get that real heavy punk sort of chug with it, that crossover sound for sure, and I think it's a great track. And it's got a good place on the album right after kind of a real experimental one on track 5.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. You guys are all right. It is like the closest thing to like a really speedy, chuggy thrash song. So it does stand out.
Yeah.
But let's now this is where I sort of stopped for me wondering what was the point. The instrumental that we get at track number 7, which is Instrumental DSB. What do you think, Jason? You got any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I really like this track, but to
Okay.
be honest, I wish it wasn't instrumental. I
Mhm.
keep waiting for Tommy's vocals to kick in. Um, I don't know why they chose this song to be an instrumental because I think it would have made a really great vocal song too. Um, and there was lots of opportunities for some very memorable lyrics and choruses. So I just kind of make them up in my head as I'm listening, usually. But the drumming on this song is absolutely insane. It has a really kind of a predominant tribal beat and rhythm that really reminds me of Chaos AD era Sepultura and what Igor was doing on that album. But yeah, it's a cool song, but again, I wish there was vocals on it.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think it would have been. I think the vocals on this album. I mean, the musicianship is second to none, but I find the vocals and the vocal change on this album from track to track, or even within the same tracks, keeps it very interesting and changing. And I think that's part of the appeal. So I kind of with Jason on that, not to just to jump on his, but I think it would have been more. It would have been a better punch with maybe some vocals on it and maybe a shorter instrumental somewhere else, maybe delving into more of an industrial kind of view of what's going to come maybe in albums from now. Might have been a little bit more prudent, something maybe more under 2 minutes in my mind. That's what I'm thinking. But yeah, I mean, it's okay. But it's just, I would have rather it be a vocalized track.
Okay. And Billy, you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I like it, and I'm good
Okay.
with no vocals. I think like rhythmically, it reminds me of Rush solo music, and I
Hmm.
wouldn't be surprised if the bass and drummer were had a Rush influence in there somewhere. I mean, what bass and drummer who's talented doesn't like Rush? But like Jason, I got the tribal drumming groove in there as well. Love there's a couple funky parts that I'm a big fan of funk and funk metal, so that works for me. And I guess if I were to say, I'd want it longer. I mean, this band has talent, right? Like, and they tend to stick to a formula. So like this would have been their chance to let it rip. I would have did a 5 or 6 minute instrumental. And my only complaint is I would have liked to have given the bass and guitar more solo time and more lead time, right? It's more of a rhythmic instrumental as opposed to individual solos. But
That's a good point. When
yeah,
doing an instrumental, why not
yeah,
showcase the talents of every individual,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
And
that's a
they
good
have the
point.
talent. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I like it. My only complaint is I wish it was longer, and I'm good without vocals.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So the next 3 songs, 8, 9, and 10, are all pretty solid in my mind. But we'll start with number 8, Rights to Nothing. Jason, lead us off.
Yeah, it's not my favorite track in the album, but
Okay.
it does have another earworm of a chorus, kind of within a song that chugs along again in that kind of Anthrax stompy vein. Uh,
Totally.
yeah, it's a good song, but uh, to me, it kind of falls short when stacked up against all the bangers on this album. What I do
Mhm.
love it for, though, is that it definitely reminds me of Anthrax, and I can't get enough Anthrax. So if Prong's giving me more Anthrax, then I'm good with
That's funny. You pretty much stole my thunder because that's what I was going to say too. I was going to say the same thing. But again, I'll just like focus on like the lyrics and that line. You got the right to nothing. I love that. That's such a.
Yeah,
You got the
that's a
right
good
to
line.
nothing, the right to nothingness, right
Yeah,
to something, the right to nothingness. I love that. That's so great. It's so
yeah, it's
like,
smart. It's smart.
yeah, nihilistic, kind of like nihilistic lyrics.
Yeah.
But like the whole song's about disillusionment and resignation. So it's kind of cool. I like that for that reason. But yeah, it's a pretty decent song. It's pretty chunky. And Jim, what do you think?
I like it. I mean, I think it sounds like Indians totally off of,
Yeah.
I think it totally does. And I mean, that's obviously attracted me to it, but I think it's a great track. I like it. Got a good spot coming out of the instrumental, which I'm not necessarily 100% fan of. And then kind of, it's all about calibration. And I think that happens
Yeah.
here to some
Yeah.
degree. And they kind of return to the kind of crossover-y kind of roots. But I think it sounds just parts of it sounds like Indians. I absolutely love it. So it's a good track.
Cool. And Billy?
I think it's a solid track. I wouldn't put it in my favorite sort of three. I guess I'm a bit like Jason there. But again, I think it's solid. Like they're back to that, maybe a bit back to the formula on the first sort of four songs, where the chorus sort of drives the song and the melodic chorus and catchy chorus. And again, it sounds great, but I like what was before it and what's to come a little bit more.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, so with that said, we'll go to track number 9, Prime Cut. I must say this is like a really good drum track to something in the first minute. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think Prime Cut is a bit of an odd one. I mean, it totally fits alongside the rest of the tracks found on Beg, so it makes sense for that reason. But this one has like tons of repetition in the riffing and kind of slow burning dynamics that lend it to being the most, I don't know, maybe quasi-industrial sounding song on the album. I think it certainly kind of paved the way for what we would later hear with an album like Cleansing. I think it probably, yeah, it probably would have fit well on Cleansing. So yeah, that's about all I have with Prime Cut. I really, really enjoy it. But yeah, really lots of repetition, which is cool.
I think that I like the last 30 seconds because that pace just picks right up. And I love the line again, like it's like the cut is very rough. I just there's just certain lines that just for me I'm sitting there going, yeah, that's cool. Like I like that. I dig it. But
Yeah.
I could see this off. I could very much see this being off Cleansing for sure. It would fit in that category of songs. What do you think, Billy?
I actually like it. I
Okay.
probably shouldn't like it, like based on my personal like
Got some
music taste, right? Like I love the vocal approach. Like I don't even know how to
Yeah.
describe that approach or what's happening there, but it's so addictive, right? Like I also really like Primus, and the unusual vocal delivery kind of makes me think of like Primus a little bit. But yeah, so love the vocals, the a heavy groove here. The bass is taking a partial lead role on this track, which I appreciate. Right, you can hear the bass in many, but here the bass is sort of coming up front. I even at times hear a bit of like later era melodic DRI in the second half of the track comes to mind. But yeah, like I'd probably rank this third, and it surprises me. Like, and as I listened to it this week, I don't think it was a favorite track of mine. I think I've kind of matured over the years and really appreciate this song now. So that's kind of cool.
Hey, won you over. That's great. What do you think, Jim?
pretty much the same. I mean, I here I'm not into the kind of the spoken chanting word as much as I was in the other ones, but I mean, this is another fantastic drum track as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, they're definitely, you can hear a more pronounced bass in it. And I think that's really cool too. We're always, especially this time, 89, 90, there's some bands were really kind of, pushing, some were down tuning their bass. So, I think this is a great, and it probably would have worked throughout a few more tracks as well. But yeah, it's okay. It's not my favorite on the album, but it's a good track.
Okay, cool. And then we get to track 10, which is probably my second favorite song on the album, Just the Same. What do you think, Jason?
Well, this is absolutely my favorite song on the album.
Okay, cool.
And perhaps the least groovy of songs, but where it lacks, in the groove, it's rife in hardcore punk attitude. This song, more than any others, kind of gives us I think, a glimpse the band's early punk hardcore roots. Has a really kind of New York City hardcore vibe to it, and at times reminds me of one of my favorite New York City hardcore bands, Cro-Mags.
Mhm.
More specifically, their '86 album Age of Quarrel, which is an album I absolutely love. Um, and and on Age of Quarrel, if you listen to that album by Cro-Mags, they were just starting to experiment with metal in their hardcore approach. So I love this track for that reason alone. I don't know. I think it marries metal and hardcore to a
Mhm.
perfect degree.
Okay. I like the second half is where my ears pick up or perk up for me. Like you get the solo at the 250 mark, and then at 315 it just speeds up crazy, and there's that super killer chug all the way through. I like it. I think it's a great way to. I wish this was the closing song. Unfortunately, it's not, but it's good. What do you think, Jim?
Well, yeah, I think it's for their obviously their own material. It's a great closer on the album. Kind of again like kind of returns back to maybe 1 and 3, I think, a little bit, and it has
Hmm.
that more definitely that more heavy punk sound, but really there's a lot of good thrashy vibes in here too. I like it. It's one of my favorites on the album. Love it.
Cool. And Billy?
Yeah, no, I'm a pretty big fan too, right? Like I like the way they've combined a few different directions in this song, and it actually works, right? Like Jason mentioned the hardcore. We all sort of see the thrash or crossover thrash in here, and I don't know if it's just me, and I don't know why I hear funk, but I hear a couple funky elements in the track as well. So yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I like it. It's a good mix, like you, Ken. I like the ending probably a bit more when it really picks up pace. But yeah, I think it's probably I guess I view this as the last song on the album. I
Me
kind
too.
of do a live song as an extra add-on, right? But
Mhm.
Yeah.
because it is live, right? Like so, it's not.
Yeah.
If it was a studio cover, then I'd consider it part of the album. But yeah, I like just the same. It's a good track.
I think you make a
Cool.
good point there, Billy. I think the funk, the funk for me reminds me of like early Bad Brains type
Yeah,
funk,
yeah, yeah.
like a hardcore
Yeah.
funk.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, they do it really well in this song. But yeah, like you, this was the end of the album for me. I don't even think I really listened to that last song,
Yeah.
the live track.
Yeah. I'll
Was it
mention it.
on the
So
original? Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
uh
Yeah,
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 it's
it,
on
it
my
was. Yeah,
original
yeah.
CD.
I have
Yeah.
no recollection of that, but yeah.
Third from the Sun. So it's the cover from the post punk band Chrome. So and it's done live. I'm not really a fan of it. Anyone want to jump in with this one because that's not something I like. But
Yeah,
Jim,
I'm not a
Billy,
fan of it.
yeah, okay, Jim, Billy,
Take it or leave it.
Yeah,
It's for me, it's just an extra. It's like it would be touted as just some bonus material, I guess. I mean, it's not bad. I'm not familiar with the original artist, so but I mean, it would have been better if if they had done a re-release and this was part of it rather than being on the original album. But
yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, it's an odd choice. An odd choice.
it is, and I'm glad they did. If they do a cover, I'm glad it's something that then I have to go and look and see, maybe listen to what the original artist did. But going back to song 10, I even have like some. You guys were talking about the funk element, like even with Mike Muir's other band there, Infectious Grooves, that was later. You get kind of some of that on there. I'm wondering
Yeah,
if maybe some of that was borrowed from some of this album, to be
that's
honest
a
with
good
you,
point.
even though Suicidal such, I mean, as a crossover legend, but I mean the Infectious Grooves definitely is a funk groove band as well. So
Yeah, yep.
yeah, that's fair. So I know we don't normally rank our albums, but I'm going to do it this time anyways. So let's just give it a 10. What do you think, Jason? If you gave it someone said you rank it out of 10.
If you were talking to 17-year-old me in
Yeah.
1990, definitely a 10.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I wouldn't be far off it now. I don't think a lot has changed as far as my love for this album. It feels a little dated, but I mean, of course, it's how many years old now. Um, I would say a solid 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking before about this, like Jim and Billy and I, we were saying like it does seem a little dated now, listening to it years later. So like I would give it a 7 for me. I like it, but they have better albums that came later on. Like I think Cleansing's a masterpiece. I even think Prove You Wrong is really good.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love
And
Prove You Wrong. A lot of
yeah,
people don't like that one.
I love
Yeah.
that album.
Yeah,
That
me
album's
too.
great.
Yeah.
And I was telling Jim and Billy before you came on about I love Power of the Damager. I even think that's a great album. Like they have better albums in their discovery that I like. So for me, I'm giving it a 7. It's not a bad album, but I'm sort of in the middle with some of the songs. What
Right.
about you guys? Billy, how about you?
Yeah, I would probably go 7 too. Like I don't find like it's aged. I remember liking it more as a as a young guy
Mm,
back at the time. Yeah, I think 7's fair now.
okay. And Jim?
I'd give it an 8. I mean, I think I'm looking at it as young me at the time, 1990. I would have been 19 years old. 19 years old? Yeah, 19 years old. And I mean, metal was changing. Whether it was changing in my mind at that point, it was very almost kind of everything was morphing and changing, and it was changing rather fast. So you had to kind of give with it, or you're gonna be left behind. And I think I would give it an 8. I do like some of their albums, including I love their newest album. I think their latest album was pretty good. And yeah, no, they do a Rush cover on that of Working Men. So obviously,
Yeah, that's right.
they do
I
have
forgot.
some yeah, and they do a good job of it. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm a huge Rush fan, so I think that's pretty cool. But no, I'd give it an 8. I think probably it should rate higher for me as being such an important album to the actual movement at the time. So for me, musically and maybe production wise now, it does feel a little dated. I'd give it an 8, but it definitely to the movement, it's definitely would be, I think it would be a 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jim, I'm going to ask you this question because I know you like Cowboys Mel. What do you think
Oh,
is better, this or Cowboys?
I got to go with Pantera. I mean, I felt
Yeah.
like I love this, but Pantera I mean, that first album, I mean, I just fell in love with it. Their first, album when they were a groove metal band compared to what was earlier. I mean, I love the raw energy and actually Cowboys, are just having I think it was released very very around this time
Yeah,
along,
4 months later it came out.
yeah. So, really, really exciting time in metal. And I think Pantera had to kind of take, even though these guys did it first, and I think created a really solid, they created a solid experience. Pantera took the kind of flag and ran with it. And I think they were sort of what metalheads like me kind of attached to at the time to say, okay, I want to run with this. I want to go with this. I want to go with this. I mean, because I love all, you go for vulgar, Cowboys, Vulgar, Far Beyond Driven's a wicked album. And then, when you start getting up there to Reinventing the Steel and that, they were starting to have some issues within the band and that. But I think Pantera for me is what really kind of, I mean, it was kind of the most popular metal at the time, the most commercial. Everybody who talks about metal kind of goes on about Pantera in the 90s. And that is true. But I mean, these guys definitely did it first, but I like Cowboys a lot. So
I think the biggest difference between the two bands
Yeah.
comes down to personalities.
true.
I
Okay.
mean, Pantera was just full of personalities.
Yeah.
And Prong, I mean, Tommy Victor's a cool guy, but definitely not the star-studded power that you had in Pantera. And I think that's
Swagger.
what really propelled Pantera forward
Yeah.
because they weren't afraid to put themselves out there, and people just really related to them. And for me, Tommy Victor just kind of hid in the shadows. And who the hell knew who Ted Parsons was? I mean, everyone knows who Vinny is. No one knows
Yeah.
who the hell Ted Parsons is. So I think that's probably the biggest difference between the two bands. I think similar as far as talent and as far as the music, the relevancy of the music, they're very similar.
Mhm.
But it's just those personalities, those big egos and personalities that really kind of made the difference, in my opinion.
And Jason's right. In Pantera, you had 4 distinct personalities. Phil just went for it. You know, you had them. You had you had Dimebag in there, and I mean, at the
Yeah,
time, it was just like everybody. And I
no one
remember
could
this.
touch them. No one,
Yeah, and
just
you
for that
remember
reason alone.
buying the DVDs, and you watched the DVDs back then. It was probably even VHS, and like in one there, they would take sledgehammers and go up to somebody's car and ask, "Can they break the car apart?" And that was so cool in between the songs and that. And then in one video, they were in one of the home videos, they were the guy was photocopying his ass and cut it all up on the photocopier, and they were doing silly stuff like that. That was just like, oh, this is cool for young-minded people like myself.
Jim, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but the Norwegian black metal band Satyricon toured with Pantera very early on, the early 2000s, and they toured North America with Pantera. Phil was a huge fan, so they invited them out. No one had heard of Satyricon North America. Like they were just this fucking obscure black metal band from Norway, but Pantera brought them out and they toured all over North America. And Satyricon released a DVD called Roadkill Extravaganza, which is all behind the scenes shit with Pantera,
Oh,
and it's fucking insane. So
Mm.
if you love that behind the scenes shit with
yeah.
Pantera, seek out the Roadkill Extravaganza DVD and you get tons more of that shit from the Satyricon perspective.
Oh,
It's
cool.
really
Awesome. I
cool.
will definitely.
Yeah.
Cool. You have any final thoughts there, Billy?
Yeah, no, I think Jason and Jim make the 2 main points, right? Like the personalities of Pantera is sort of the big driver, right? I mean, they were a marketing machine for the band,
Mhm.
right?
They
I mean,
were.
other than maybe Rex Brown, like I never found he stood out like to the same degree the other.
He didn't.
He was the
Yeah.
calmness in the band, but and then I think Jim raised a point that resonated with me. Like coming into the '90s, being a thrash fan, traditional metal fan, it was probably an easier move over to Pantera Cowboys versus some of the old metal aspects of Prong. Beg to differ, so it just fit with where I was at the time a little bit more. So yeah, so if you ask me that question, I'd pick the Cowboys from Hell, but just mainly due to the fact that that's where I was at music wise.
Yeah, but when that album came out, it was an explosion. Like it was so like kick ass. It was in your face. How
Oh
could you
yeah.
not like that album? Like that album to me was just it skyrocketed so quick,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and all the big personalities, of course. And then, Phil himself, like he's such a crazy man on the stage. Just his look and yeah, that's such a great album.
It's
It's an
killer.
album that you
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Maybe the only
Oh,
other thing I'd add, sorry, Ken, is I got to see Prong live about
oh cool.
years ago in New York City.
Okay.
If memory serves me right, they were opening for Overkill. It was
Okay.
at the big theater there at Times Square. I actually really enjoyed Prong live. It was before this new album, so they were playing mostly the older stuff, but
Okay.
lots of energy. That I mean, I guess they're New York based, right? So
Mhm.
the local crowd, but I thought they did a fantastic job. Like I've got a couple clips of that on my Instagram account.
That's
I
cool.
really
Yeah.
enjoyed them live. They do a great job to this day.
I think
Cool.
I think Tommy used to work at CBGB's actually back in
Yeah,
the day.
Mhm.
He was a bartender or maybe sound guy. I can't remember,
young
but
guy.
he was really rooted in that scene for a very, very long time. So not
Right.
surprising that they're kind of hometown heroes.
Yeah.
Did you ever see them live, Jason?
I have not.
Yeah, me
Not that I can
neither.
remember. I
Yeah,
might have, but I don't think so. I don't think so.
yeah,
Not
same here.
not recently and maybe back in the day, but I can't be certain. Yeah.
Well, we always know that we can count on Billy. He's seen everything.
Yeah.
He's seen it all. All right, guys. So we're going to close out our podcast segment with a top 10 of crossover acts that we all would put together. Jim, why don't you start us off with the crossover acts?
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna put them in kind of 10-1, but I mean,
Sure.
I could be all over the place with it. And some of these, some people out there may think they're not necessarily crossover, but that's just the way I look at it. So,
Sure.
But anyways, my number 10, I'd go with Agnostic Front.
Okay.
Some great albums there. I think Cause for Alarm, I believe, if I can remember right. It was a great album. They're pretty good. I like them. Number 9, SOD. That could have been probably even higher, but there's a lot of really good stuff. I mean, Speak English is a classic. At number 8, DRI. Dirty Rotten Imbeciles. I mean, they're just amazing, and I think Billy might have brought them up there when we were talking about this album, that he gets kind of, or it might have been you, Ken. I'm not sure, but anyways, a great band. I've got Prong at number 7.
Sorry, Tim, what album by DRI did you pick?
I like Thrash Zone.
Me too.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think that's a great album. Number 7, I've got Prong. Number 6, Billy, you'll like this. I've got Dead Brain Cells. I consider them, they're a thrash, but I kind of consider them in the crossover mode as well. And I mean, the I think it was 2 new singles they released recently are just kick ass. And I mean, I really hope an album comes forth from it. The 2 albums I've got the first 2, one in 87 and I think one in 89. They're really Universe. Yeah.
Self-titled. The self-titled was definitely crossover. Universe went like zooming into the progressive technical thrash.
Elements.
Number 5, Power Trip. I mean, we've talked about Power Trip before. Love that band. Number 4, Municipal Waste. What can I say? Their whole catalog is freaking awesome. I like it. Number 3, Nuclear Assault. We just talked about that album, and just amazing band. Number 2, Methods of Destruction, MOD. I mean, Gross Misconduct's a great album. It's I love it. And my number 1's got to be Suicidal. Cool. I love Suicidal Tendencies. I mean, I remember the first time I was watching, I think it was Much Music, and that's when you used to have to pay in the 80s for Much Music. So like they gave you free previews if you had, like, because I remember you used to be able to get these channels, First Choice, the Star Channel, and you had to pay. My parents would never freaking pay for that shit. We never had it. You got the free weekend. And
or you watched it when it scrambled.
Yeah.
So I remember seeing Suicidal Tendency videos on there, and the news about, I don't know if it was 87 or 86 or even earlier than that, where they got banned for like 7 or 8 years from LA. And they were like, they did like a little, like maybe a minute and a half, 2-minute kind of little news program on their Much Music news. And it was like this band, like they're so hard and heavy, and they got banned from LA, and they're from there, and they got banned. I was drawn to it. And I mean, I listened to Suicidal Tendencies, if not, I listen to it weekly, mostly daily. There's something in my playlist that's got Suicidal. So I mean, huge fan for sure.
Cool. All right. That's
favorite
awesome.
album, I would have to say, oh my God, there's so many, but I mean, I love a lot of their stuff. Maybe their later 90s stuff into 2000s got a little bit kind of different, but How Will I Laugh? I love that album. That's just an amazing album. There's not a bad track on it.
Okay, cool. Awesome. It's a good list. Billy, how about you go next?
Yeah, and so I don't know where I did albums. Like I didn't know.
You could
bands or albums, but I'll just go with albums. But the band would still fit either way. Sure. So for me, number 10, I went with Enforced, Kill Grid from 2021. I mean, these guys lean up maybe a bit towards thrash, but definitely has some crossover components. And they come from Richmond, Virginia, the same place as Municipal Waste. And there's another major modern like crossover thrash band from Richmond. I couldn't remember who it was, but there must be something in the water there. And then, so speaking of Municipal Waste, number 9, I have The Art of Partying from 2000. '87.
Good
I
album.
mean, yeah, they're all fun albums. I mean, Crossover, they're the band's equally fun live. It's crazy to see these guys. Number 8 is probably my favorite modern crossover band. Only been around since maybe 20. I've the crossover California crossover band, Drain. So I've
Never.
chosen their Living Proof 2023 album. Probably the funnest band I've ever seen live in my life. Just so much energy, power, and they do everything to break the rules and things you shouldn't do. And so, yeah, if you guys don't know them, I highly recommend checking them out. A very old school crossover, but by a very young, modern band, and the guitar player can shred as well. And then I go old school. Probably, I had a friend who, the same friend who made me listen to jazz fusion, made me listen to these two crossover albums, both from '86. So Crumbsuckers,
Oh
Life.
yeah.
Good
Free.
album.
Good
So
band.
I love like that. I just that I absorbed that fully, like from the very first listen. Just really like that. Lots of energy. Musicianship's pretty solid for a 1986 crossover band. And then an album I'm happy I finally scored a copy on vinyl. Cryptic Slaughter, Convicted,
Ah,
also from
Yep. Good
19.
band.
I have that on cassette.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, really good. I mean, to me, this is like DRI on steroids. Like it's very raw. It's very aggressive. I mean, there's even early blast beats. You get everything on that crazy album. Then I'm going to New York City, crossover band Leeway, Born to
Oh
Fire.
yeah.
From 1989. That was one of my, I think 1989, I've said it before, the best year in metal ever. And so that's just another contribution there. I actually think it has very much an Anthrax feel.
Yep.
To that band. Then I got to go to the going modern again, Power Trip, Nightmare Logic. I think
Yeah.
it's such a good album. My top three has been with me since I was a kid, so I have more time with them. But this thing, again, very sad that we lost Riley Gale, and this is probably one of the best bands I've seen live. I think they're fantastic. Then I'm going Nuclear Assault. Well, I know we did Handle with Care, but I'm going a bit more into the crossover hardcore period. I chose Game Over. I think it's a classic album. John Connolly, perfect for this style of music. Just an explosive record. And then Jim, you already hit this one. I love DRI. I love all of DRI, old stuff,
Yeah.
new stuff. But for me, I just 1989 is my favorite year. So I'm going like Thrash Zone. I think all the tracks are good, but also I think DRI doesn't get credit, right? This particular album has some really unique songs, right?
Yeah.
Like Abduction, like with the child's choir, that's so like catchy, and like you wouldn't expect a crossover band to do something like Abduction, but really cool. And then number one, if I was doing bands, this wouldn't be number one. But one of my favorite, and I don't know, maybe this album's not as much crossover, but Suicidal Tendencies, Lights, Camera, Revolution.
Great album.
I just think it's like a near perfect album. You just get everything, right? Like thrash, crossover, loaded with funk and groove, like just so good. Not a weak song on that album. And also, I strongly believe that's the band at its peak in terms of musicians in Suicidal. That's
Cool.
it.
Good list. Good list.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to go next, and since Jason's our guest tonight, we'll let him go last and close the show with his list. So at number 10, I'm going to go with Bad Brains. I really like Bad Brains quite a lot. Just such a great band. For me, it was always a cross between Eye Against Eye and Quickness. I thought both those records were just some killer hardcore thrash. It's got everything. It's got a little bit of raps. It's got it all. Such a great band. Number 9, I'm going to put a band that you may not know. This is Suicide Watch from the UK. They are a crossover band. They only have 2 albums though, but they've been around for like 15 years. the initial album, Global Warning, is just super killer stuff. Covered by, and I think the covers by Ed Repka. Such a great album. Number 8, this might be obscure to some. This is a band called Send More Paramedics. Again, another UK thrash hardcore band. And I'm bringing this up because their name is taken from, you might know this, it's taken from a horror movie, Return of the Living Dead. There is a scene where everyone is trapped in the morgue, and they call for the paramedics. The paramedics show up, and then as soon as the doors open, the zombies flood in and just tear them to shreds. And then the one zombie gets on the mic and says, "Send more paramedics." They do it again with the police, and it's like, "Send more police." But these guys were cool. Unfortunately they broke up in 2021. But the first album, A Feast for the Fallen, is really good.
What year was that one?
That would have been like early 90s, I think. Or was it 89, 90? Yep. Yeah, look it up.
They've been around a while.
Yeah, they've been around for quite a while. Look it up. They're not a bad band.
Cool.
Next, I'm going to put Body Count on my list. I mean, you can't have a list without Body Count. Come on, like Ice-T and Ernie C. Oh, what a great pairing. I mean, for me, I love the first two albums. Born Dead is probably my favorite of the two, from like the self-titled. And I heard that they have a new album coming out this year called Merciless. So
new single just out last week too.
Oh, I haven't heard the single yet. I'll have to look it up. Okay,
but
cool,
you know
cool.
what? You know what?
Yeah.
They have that cover of they do a suicidal cover, and he updates it with some of the lyrics. Where he does the one where all I wanted was a Pepsi, and he's just institutionalized.
Oh, yeah.
And he updates it with he's playing video games, he's trying to log into his email account, and he wants to kill Oprah. So it's pretty cool how they do it.
Cool. Cool.
That's awesome.
That's cool. I'll look that out. And then number 6, I'm putting Cerebral Fix. I love this band. Tower of Spite is one of my favorite albums. It's so great. What a great UK band. It's just too bad they broke up in 2017. And number 5, I'm putting it's Toxic Holocaust, one of my favorite bands. I love Joel Grimes. I love all the albums that he's worked. 6 albums to date. Still going strong. Lots of speed, lots of thrash, punk, black metal vibes. Hell on Earth is a wicked album. If you've not heard that album, check that album out. That's worth your time. Number 4 is Power Trip. Of course, we did our podcast on Power Trip. Nightmare Logic is just a killer record. It's got some of the best thrash punk I've ever heard, and those vocals are not matched by very, very many other musicians. Great album. I'm not too sure what the new album is going to be like with the new singer, but we'll have to give it a try. And then the top 3 are the faithful ones, like COC, Corrosion of Conformity.
I forgot about that.
One of my favorite bands. Blind is my favorite album by them. I know Eye for an Eye and Animosity are really good, but I just love Blind. I love the fact that they brought Carl Agel on to sing. It's just too bad he was only in for one album, but I thought he brought something to the band that they didn't have before. And because he could sing punk, he could sing thrash. It was great. That's such a great album. Number 2, it's got to be Sod, Stormtroopers of Death, and their connection to Anthrax, Scott Ian, Charlie Benante, Lilker on bass, Billy Milano on vocals. Speak English or Die, such a great album. And my favorite song on that's Freddy Krueger. I love that song. It's so great. So great. What a great band. And number 1, you have to go DRI, Dirty Rotten Imbeciles. Like Trash Zone is such a great album. I like Crossover too, but
Four of a Kind. I like Four of a Kind.
Four of a Kind is good. Yeah, they don't really have a bad album in the bunch, but Thrash Zone, I would agree with Billy, is like pretty much like that is just a killer album from beginning to end. So that's my list.
I can't believe I missed COC. Deliverance is one of my favorite albums. I can't believe I totally missed that. Totally went
I was surprised it wasn't on your list because you made that comment in the past.
All the time. I listened to it probably weekly. That album. I'm like an idiot.
But do you consider it crossover? That's the question.
I do, and I just totally missed that. Damn it.
Yeah, they're crossover. I mean, their earlier stuff. I mean, the later stuff they changed the sound a bit, but the first 3 albums, they're pretty much like. it's like pretty much punk and
Yeah,
thrash mixed.
yeah.
Like you can't say they're not. They started
Oh,
getting
definitely, definitely. I think
yeah,
you hit the nail on the head. They're just a completely different band than they were at
Yeah.
one
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean the later albums are vastly different, but those first three,
yeah,
they're pretty damn
for sure.
solid.
Yeah.
Ken, I was
Okay,
just
sir,
looking up.
Jason.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Ken, quickly. I
yeah,
was looking up Send More Paramedics here.
yeah.
What was the album you mentioned? I don't know this band.
The album I mentioned. Let me just go back to my list. A Feast for the Fallen.
Okay, 2002. Okay, I'll check that out.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Check them out. They have 4 albums out. The second album, The Hollowed and the Heathen, is pretty good too.
Okay.
Pretty good fuck. More like it's like hardcore thrash, so it's not really punky, but it's more on the hardcore side. But it's I love it, energetic. Okay, Jason, the man of the hour, you get to close out the list. Let's hear what you got.
Well, I'm probably sharing a lot. I think, well, definitely sharing a lot of the similar ones that you guys mentioned. I will mention off the
Sure.
top, though, that I'm probably the lone voice on this, but I never got into contemporary crossover ever.
Oh, okay,
None of
Really?
it.
okay,
Nope.
interesting.
I don't
Okay.
know why. It's not that I think the bands are bad. It's
Mm-hmm.
just I feel I just couldn't connect with the younger ones doing this music. I don't know why. I don't know why.
Okay.
I thought it got. I do know why. I thought things got pretty campy with a lot of these bands, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that kind of ruined the spirit for me in a lot of ways. I know bands like Power Trip aren't campy, but there are a lot of campy ones out there. I believe there's a term going around these days called pizza thrash,
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
never really got into the pizza thrash vibe. Just throwing on those white high tops and tight blue jeans and just looking the part and just rehashing music that is done quite a bit better 30 years before. So I don't have any contemporary thrash,
Sure, that's
contemporary
fine.
crossover on this list. Um, but not to say, maybe one day I'll get into it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But number 10 for me is Uncle Slam, Say Uncle from
Good.
'89. Musically, this is kind of a straight up late '80s thrash album with a really early '80s kind of Motorhead vibe. Vocally, it's not thrash at all or crossover. It sounds like hardcore. So they're one of the first crossover bands to experiment also with kind of hip hop and rap elements. And in fact, their drummer went on to drum live for Beastie Boys quite a few years later. So really cool
Cool.
band. If you never checked out Uncle Slam, really Say Uncle's an awesome album. Number
Mm-hmm.
9 is Excel, Split Image.
Okay.
Part from Beg to
Mm.
Differ. This is one of the most mature and professional sounding, I think, crossover albums of its time, which was, I believe, '87. It just has an awesome bass tone that really kind of amplifies the songs into a really crushing territory. Now, I talked about young guys doing crossover these days, but these guys were all like 17 and 18 when this album came out in '87, so they were really young guys making a crossover album, and it's a really mature sounding album for the age of these guys. It is a bit campy lyrically, but I think the music alone definitely makes up for some of the campiness found on the album. Um, Number 8, we got Billy Milano and MOD, Gross Misconduct, '89. This is an album that saw MOD take on a more serious tone, kind of shedding the campy stuff that was found on USA for MOD and Surfing MOD. Not that those albums weren't cool. They were
Mm-hmm.
just goofy as fuck. But this album was a lot more serious in tone, and I think MOD really kind of excelled with the serious tones. I think it kind of made them more legitimate as a thrash band to me. A song like True Colors is fucking awesome. Like it's up there with, songs, some of the best Exodus songs or Anthrax songs. I really, really, really love that song and love this album. Number 7, DRI's Thrash Zone. You guys said it best. I have really nothing more to add other than it's Beneath the Wheel is a fucking incredible song and a different kind of tone for DRI. Really love that album. Number 6 for me is Cro-Mags, Best of Wishes from '89. Um, Prior to '89, the album before this, I touched on it when we were talking about Beg to Differ. Age of Quarrel was the first album I got into these guys, but it wasn't until their singer John Joseph exited that they started throwing more metal elements into their super New York hardcore style. So they were a New York hardcore band full on at one point, got rid of John Joseph, got Harley Flanagan, the bass player, to take over on vocals for this album, Best of Wishes, and you have just a fucking straight up incredible crossover thrash album. And it really pissed off all the hardcore heads because they went from a super hardcore band to not at all hardcore and a crossover thrash band. And they also got really right leaning in their lyrics, which really pissed off a lot of the punks and hardcore guys from back in the day. So awesome album from Cro-Mag's Best of Wishes from '89. Suicidal Tendencies number 5. How I Laugh Tomorrow When I Can't Even Smile Today. Far cry from their first 2 albums, which lean way more towards the hardcore punk side of things. But I think it's this album that put them on the radar to the long hairs. And it's just rife with the aggressiveness of metal, lots of Motorhead, Metallica vibes. As thrashy it is, I still think it has a real street and urban vibe, which is really, really, really cool. Still love that album. Number 4 is Agnostic Front, Cause for Alarm. I think someone else had this. Was it?
Yeah,
you?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Another band that was always too punk for metal, the metal crowd, and too metal for the punk crowd. Again, things changed with this album. Tons of riffing that recalls kind of early Metallica and Megadeth, and far more shredding solos, which appealed to the metalheads. Yeah, super super cool album. And another band that was also very left leaning prior to this album, and then went way right and pissed off a lot of their left leaning fans back in the day. So I don't know what it was, why all these bands were left leaning, these hardcore bands, and then turned to thrash and suddenly they're right leaning.
Go against the
Sort of
grain, I
weird
guess,
political
right?
stuff back in the day.
Right,
What's
Jason?
that,
Go
Ken?
against the grain.
Yeah, maybe going
Punk.
against the grain.
A lot of
Yeah.
punk, technically goes against the grain for everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. True.
So if you go thrash, then you're basically like, oh, we'll go the right side.
Yeah, exactly. Number 3 is Ludacris, Immaculate Deception.
Cool.
Another band that was always too punk for the metal crowd and too metal for the punk crowd. But all that changed with this album. I think it's a really cool album that definitely leaned towards more of the thrash side. They did have an album from '88 called Power Trip. I'm not sure if that influenced the contemporary crossover band to some degree. Maybe not. Number 2, SOD, Speak English or Die. What more can be said other than the pedigree of that band? Super super fucking cool. Certainly not an album that would fly in today's overly sensitive climate. Yeah, it's a little risque. And number 1 for me is Prong, Beg to Differ. But Billy has me wondering if this is a crossover album at all. So I don't know. Maybe I need to change that.
No, dude, it's crossover, dude.
Yeah.
You can't say it's not.
Yeah.
You can't say it's not. But that's a good list, Jason. Very, very good list.
Yep.
You stuck to the really kind of like traditional, more hardcore, and this guy is one of us.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I have a whole world that will open up to me with this contemporary crossover stuff. Maybe it's just something I just, once I get into it, you never know, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Well, check out Send More Paramedics.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was
you
just
were going to say,
yeah, Jason hit on that. I discovered that terminology recently, pizza box thrash. And I was like, what the hell is that? And then I looked it up and it says like also known as bandana thrash.
Yeah.
Like Toxic Holocaust or
municipal waste.
They're all wearing bandana. So I never heard those terms before, but I looked it up and I'm like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Like
the first time I ever heard it was reading a review. I believe it was Raider. I believe, but that's the first time I had ever heard that term.
Okay.
I just think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
When you mention that, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Because it's pizza and headbands, right?
Yeah, I guess. But I see what you're saying, young younger fans, like, or people getting into like punk thrash. I guess that's where they're coming from. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would make an awesome crossover band. Those four
Oh,
guys.
yeah.
Absolutely.
There you go.
For sure. Absolutely. The band, the thrash band Bonded by Blood, did do a song, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles song, which is kind of neat, out their first
Oh, nice.
album,
Cool.
which is pretty cool. So, but yeah. All right, guys, we're pretty much coming up to like 2 hours. So amazingly, we kept it with Jason here. We kept it down to like, pretty good, trim and slim. Everyone's some good points
Was
to
this
make.
one of the longest ones, or you go about 2, right?
We go about
Yeah, we
backwards.
had one that was like over 2 hours. I forget which one it was. Metallica was pretty long when we did Justice.
Yeah.
I was like a little over 2 hours, I think, and Anthrax was Among the Living was a little over 2 hours.
Well, there's a lot to talk
It's too
about with
hard.
Anthrax. So
Yeah.
Oh hell yeah! I could talk about them all day long. Wouldn't be a problem for me, dude.
Nice.
So, with that being said, next week, Jim, you're hosting. Did you want to announce the album?
Yeah.
Flops.
I forgot. Yeah. No. Yes.
Now you know how I feel, Jim. The other day.
I got Billy the other day with it. Now I'm sitting here just flotsam and jetsam. Sorry guys, but no place for disgrace. So
Nice.
we're gonna be deep diving into that masterpiece.
Did they do a re-recording of that?
Yes. 2014.
So this is the original, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We don't like the 2014 version, dude.
You guys are going to talk about it though, hopefully.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
We have to bring it up because they did re-record it, right? So
Yeah.
but I can
Very
tell
cool.
you, I'm
Love
not a
that
fan.
album. So looking
Yeah.
forward to that one.
Yeah, 1988, great year. So that will be episode 21. So just so that everyone's aware of that. So yeah, we're 21 episodes in and still going strong.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I had a lot
Absolutely,
of fun.
dude.
Yeah,
I'm glad you
really
could make it.
appreciate it. And
No
Yeah, I
problems,
think-
dude. I mean,
I
how
think
we
we
all work
dissect-
together in the metal pit, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Jason. You're fucking awesome, man.
Yeah,
Thank
man.
you, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Wealth of knowledge on this band because I know enough about the band, but I'm not as knowledgeable as you. So
Well,
it's
I
great
want to
that
know. I want to know what
Yeah.
Anthrax shirt you're wearing. I only see the logo,
Oh.
but I'm curious.
Oh, this is the thing. Have you seen this one?
Oh, fucking sweet!
Yeah. I bought that a few years ago. It's great. It's like the thing. I love it.
Wait a minute, is that a licensed shirt?
Yeah, it's Anthrax. Yep.
Wow, I didn't even know they had a thing connection
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah,
thing,
he's
and I love
wearing.
it.
What I like about this shirt is he's got the skateboard.
Yeah.
Oh,
which is
dude.
great. Yeah, that's a great shirt. One of my favorite shirts.
Oh, fuck, I've never seen that. I'm seeking that out right after this. So
Yeah. I bought it a couple years ago. I've had it for a few years, so it's been around.
so
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah,
Two
it's
of
a
the
great
best
shirt.
things in life: Anthrax and the thing. There you go.
Oh yeah. And the skateboard on top of it. I love the fact
There
that
you
he's
go,
holding
yeah.
onto the skateboard. It's so great.
Yeah.
So cool. Clever shirt.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone have any final thoughts before we close out? No?
Just once again, thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank
guys.
you.
And I just want to say, have a safe trip, Billy.
Yes.
And same with Jason and Kim. You guys have a rocking good time.
Yeah,
you
man.
guys are so jealous of all you guys heading off across the pond.
Don't be jealous of the money we spend.
Yeah, but it's worth it, dude. It's worth it.
It is. Yeah.
For the bands you're going to be able to see and review and talk about, it's worth it, dude.
Yeah.
How long are you there, Billy, in Europe? You're there for
I'm we're looking at about 3.5 weeks.
Jesus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
crazy.
I think we're doing a week and a half, and that's long enough for me.
Right.
You're a trooper, dude. I want to get home after a week. I'm like, oh man.
I added on Bloodstock the following week in just outside of London, so that sort of extended it.
Yeah. Have you been to Bloodstock before?
Yeah, once, probably like 8 years ago. But I understand it's gotten a lot bigger now. So curious.
Yeah.
Now.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, with that being said, we'll sign out. See you all next week.
Cool. Thanks
Thanks, guys.
everyone.
Cheers.